father figure in a child's transition into young adulthood. Personally, I grew up with a loving father. It's just during the times of transition, he was not around uh, because he was working far off. I was in the leafy suburbs, what others call Ushago, and he was in Nairobi. And because of the nature of the work he did, he wasn't as frequent at home as possible. And so I grew up, Borauhai. That's French for, you just wing it. But when it came to the times when I had cleared campus now, decision making of now, when is the right time to have a girlfriend? How do I even get confidence of approaching one? When it comes to the transitions in my life, such as when it was time for me to get married, there are questions of now, so how do I navigate that? The bride price payment, as is very common in our traditional setup. Uh, questions about how do I set up my marriage? What is the yardstick for some of the decisions that I'll be making as a husband? And now having a daughter who's 5 years old, there are those questions that I really lean on. So how do other dads do it? Now that my dad passed on when I was in campus. So even myself, I'm curious. I'm curious to know how uh, do we navigate these things do we navigate, raising a child towards adulthood? And I believe this affects both gender. Yeah. But anyway, so um Bwana Timothy Matheka, I believe you are in, and allow me
Yes,
to
I
just introduce you.
am. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Timothy Matheka is the CEO of Tanare Trust, um, where ropes, I know most of you, especially from the church setup, have done what the rites of passages for the young ones as they transition to teens. Actually, that was the anchor place for ropes. That is CEO, that's Tanare Trust. So, Bwana Timothy Matheka, karibu sana, and you'll tell us a bit more about yourself, even as you carry on. Karibu.
Thanks a lot, Moses, and I hope I can be heard clearly. I hope so. Can I get a thumbs up? Thank you so much, Moses, for that. We just heard my name is Timothy Matheka. I serve as the executive officer, or as popularly known in our setup, executive director of Tanari Trust. Um, I am a firstborn of five siblings. I'm blessed to have two children who I dearly love. One is 8 years old, and the other one is 5 years old. And also, I would be ashamed to say I'm a born again Christian. Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior of my life. And I am grateful and honored to be here this evening or this night to be able to engage people, parents, aspiring parents, current parents, single parents, generally the area of parenting as we talk about, and especially how we need to address parenting in the stage of transitions, especially for a young person getting into young adulthood. And that's why I'm here today. I'll really want to encourage us to engage as best as we can, but also in moments of the questions, I've already seen them already streaming in before my presentation. I'll try to answer them to the best of my knowledge as I continue sharing this session for today. So I don't know if this is the cue where I continue there after Moses, or
Yes,
I can
please.
continue.
Yes, please.
All right.
Yes, please, carry on.
So I want to start this session by just asking a question, and this question will be just a question of if you were to use one word, how do you describe your father or a father figure in your life? One word, just one word. You can type it in on the chat. Just one word describing your father or a father figure in your life. Okay, let them come streaming in as they come in. Just be honest, just share the best you can. We'll be looking at them as we continue. Thank you so much. They're still running in. Awesome, awesome. Um, as they come through, why I'm starting with that question is just to bring a place of stating that we have a picture of, of, of who our father or our father figure has been in our lives. And this evening or this night, as we engage, we'll be talking about what you are sharing now and how it has affected you to where you are at now. But especially, we'll narrow it down to a significant stage of your life of how you are moving from dependency, whereas children, to a place of, let me say, starting the place of independence, which you call young adulthood. And that will be a focus area, and that is what, as you share, just to keep that in mind as you're sharing, just we'll get to a point where we will have a session of just sharing what you're sharing. Where did you first experience it, or where did you feel what you're sharing now? And that is something which I'll be coming back to you in line of just what you've shared of things which the picture which you had of your father or the father figure which you had in your lives. As just to give a line of thought, just to manage exactly how we're going to do, I'll be taking you through a PowerPoint presentation, and I'll having moments where we'll be having sessions of just breakout rooms, just to create an expectation for you as we run this session. And during these sessions, as the questions stream in, my brother Moses will help me whenever we need to answer a question. I'll be assisted there, and maybe I'll take a pause and answer questions in line with which you're going through. So for now, I will quickly diving into a presentation which I would like you to engage me with as I take you through this session for today of understanding the importance of a father or a father figure in a child's life as they're transitioning from childhood into young adulthood, childhood to young adulthood. So I will kindly ask the person who's sharing the PPT will just take a moment and just share it. Thank you so much, Moses, as you start to share. So as it's coming up, quickly, I'll just share. I'll take you to a just run through. I'll start by introducing where I actually, let me say, my vocation or my ministry or my work, my day-to-day work, where I come from. And the first thing is just today's topic is very clear there. So it is the importance of a father or a father figure in a child's transition into young adulthood. So I'll get into the next slide, which talks about who we are. So Tonight Trust, what is our vision? Tonight's Trust, his vision is empowered youth transforming their communities. Empowered youth transforming communities. Tonight Trust was formed in the year 2001, and our focus area has been youth ministry, where we have been, and what Moses mentioned earlier, what we are popularly known for is ROPES, which is Rites of Passage Experiences Program, which is the adolescent one, which we focus on the transitioning of young people or the children into young adulthood. So, what is our mission? What is our day to day as an organization? So, tonight, to the next slide, our mission is to empower youth to become God fearing community transformers through creating creative programming. Our mission is to empower youth to become God fearing community transformers through creative programming. So, that's our mission. To the next slide, so we can get into what we do. So these are the programs that we run. One is the Rites of Passage Experiences program. Our key area, or let me say our emblem, our areas of promise, is that we are raising responsible, godly adults. The second area is CPR, which is called Creating Positive Relationships. This is a program where we talk about sexuality, and our key area or area which we tagline is My Sexuality is a Special Gift from God worth respecting and protecting. Three, we have our area of life skills where we teach and we create programs in schools, in youth-based organization, which we partner with, and we use the 5 C's model under the positive youth development. And the outcome is that we want that person to be leading to become a contributing member of the society. Number four, we have what we call camping. We have a campsite called Camp Malta and Camp Tepes, which has been developed, but this comes a place of, as I was to share, its experiential spaces that we use to be able to engage these programs into a place. And also the campsite is open to other people to come and camp and use it for their camping site. Our key areas of thematic areas which we run our camps is rustic, experiential, and community. Those are the thematic areas of how our campsite looks like. This really helps us to how to manage. And lastly, uh, we have what is called team building. We do groups, and the area is we inspire synergy and effectiveness in teams. So those are the key things, or the programs, or the areas of focus or activities that we do as an organization. But today I'll be practically focusing on the first one, which is ropes, which is the rites of passage experiencing, understanding the transitional space and how we need to be, and especially as we narrow down to fathers and father figures in their lives. So let's dive into this space. So let's start first of all just understanding ourselves from the whole person perspective. So we have these 5 areas in our lives. We have the physical, which is this flesh or our bodies. We have the spiritual, which is our beliefs and our faith. We have the emotional, which is the feelings. And we have the mental, our cognitive, or our minds, if I was to say that, our head, our heart. We usually say head, heart, and hands, but today we're talking about the mental aspect. And then the social aspect, the relationship aspect of it. So these 5 areas become a place of focus as we're going to be talking about this space of today. This is what we're going to unpack as we're talking about why it is important in the area of physical, spiritual, emotional, mental, and social, of how it is important for fathers and also father figures in the lives of our children as they get into the next stage of life. So, being these are the 5 areas, let me engage you into some, let me say, research-based or psychosocial aspects of development. And the next place we'll get into is to what is called the Erik Erikson stages of development. I know most of you know it, but we will get. This is what I'm going to use as the template for today to share. Erik Erikson shares the steps of all stages of the development. And we have one which is infant, which is the trust versus mistrust. And then we have the toddler, which is autonomy versus shame and doubt. We have the preschooler, which are talking about the initiative versus the guilt. And then we have the identity versus role confusion, which is the teenager. And then the young adult is intimacy versus isolation. And then we get to the middle age adult, which is talking about general relativity versus stagnation. And then the last stage, which is the older adult, which are talking about integrity versus despair. So, getting into the next space, we will be able to get into a place of what all these stages are all about. What are these stages are all about in just a nutshell. Let's get to the next slide just to understand more about just fleshing out what these stages look like in terms of the key things. So let's start by defining who a father is. Who a father is. So these are just definitions of. So the noun father, the first step. We'll go to the next place. Is noun means it's a man in relation to his child or children, or as often in the religious section is a priest, somebody, a form of address, e.g., as we know in the Catholic faith, we say father. So that is a definition of the father. But the verb, there's also a verb aspect, and I would like to just take that into consideration. The verb is a man, of a man causes pregnancy resulting in birth of a child. So I'm just taking through a point. Let's just start defining this word and then we'll get into it. So that becomes the place of understanding who a father is as we define who a father is. So the noun means it's a man in relation to a child or children. And also there's a part of actually a title. And we know it in the part of being addressed in the religious section, they say father. But also in the verb, it means a man causing pregnancy. That means siring to give to a child. That means that is what a father is. So let's get into the next stage, the next word, father figure. What is father figure? So father figure is a person who you can turn for advice and support in the same way that you might turn to your father. A father figure is a person who you can turn to for advice and support in the same way that you might turn to your father. So these 2 areas are what we are going to unpack today and looking at it from how we need to become father figures and also how fathers are important, especially in the lives of a child as they're transitioning from childhood into young adulthood. So where are we? Where are we? So let's take a generational journey to where we are coming from. So we're starting from the first area, and I've used this analogy. We have the builders who were born between 1925 and the end of the First World War. And these are the people who are currently now in their 80s and above. These are what we call builders. Then we have the baby boomers, which most of us, our parents, were born, which is the ages of 61 to 79. And then we have the Generation X, which is 1965 to 1979, who are now in their late 40s, early 60s. Then we have the Gen Y, which is the 1980s to the 1994. That's why I fall in, the ages of 31 to 45. Then we have the Gen Zs, which is the 1995 to 2009, which are the 16-year-olds, 30-year-olds. And then we have Gen Alpha, which are dealing with the age A15 and under, which are now what we are currently calling, give or take, where the people who we are focusing on now to understand them, to able to look at this, if this is the age of the children who are there, how are we engaging them? And then the Gen Beta, who are now the people who are born this year. So this is where we are in terms of the generation. If we look at it from where we, just to give a like a linear way of sharing where we're coming from to where we're at. Why am I using this? Is to be able to go to we're going to be, and we're going to get into an activity right after this, is to get to places where we want to understand ourselves as parents. For those who are parents currently, those who are aspiring to be parents, and those who also are looking at parenting or going through a space of parenting, whether as a father or a father figure. And at this juncture, I want to pose a question which I would like us to go into some breakout rooms very quickly. And this question, and I will ask my colleague Moses to type it out, is that being that I started by asking you what are the things that you one word to express your father or your father figure, I want us to go through in a breakout room, and I want us to have a time of discussion, and I want you to share how as if how was your father in terms of their behavioral, if you were to look at it from a father from a whole person aspect, what are those things that are going which can represent them that you can look at in line of this generation changes, looking at your parent or your parent, depending on whoever is alive, seeing what are the parenting areas as a father, fathers and father figures you have seen with them to where you at now, and just share what are the traits that you see compared to what you went through, what you're going through currently as a father or a father figure, and what has been before your father. Either you're talking about how you've seen it from your grandfather, your great grandfather, if they're still alive, in terms of parenting as father figures or fathers in the lives of your lives, or with your parents or your parents' parents. So we'll take that moment and go into breakout rooms. And I want you to have a time of just sharing, to just, it's like we're taking a journey back to understand this is what I saw, this is who I am, this is how I am now currently. And I want you to take to a place of reflection, and I want to give you a maximum. I'll give, because of the nature of the number of people, I want to give you a maximum of 10 minutes, and you'll be getting into rooms, and you'll be picked randomly. And the key thing is that how do we look at that? And that the questions already posted there. Thank you, Moses. Is that how was your father? If you are to look at him holistically, what are the traits you see about your father, about fatherhood currently in comparison to what you experienced? So I will take just a quick. I think Nasi has already jumped the gun very quickly, but I want us to go into breakout rooms and discuss this. And I want to give you 10 minutes and just want you to go around and just share with one another on how this question reflects on you if you were to define it now. And we'll get into the next steps as we get to unpack this, as we get to understand what does it look like to become, what is that importance of being a father or a father figure in your child's life as they're transitioning in this space of adulthood. So I will want to just, Moses will take a moment, and I would like to ask you guys, just be open, share it, and engage one another on this question, just to hear from one another, and then we'll call you back very immediately. So the breakout rooms will be happening in the next few minutes. I think each one of you will be getting into breakout rooms very quickly. I will encourage us to
Okay.
join a room. I encourage all of you to join a room.
All right. So maybe to make it easier, when you get into a breakout room, we are creating 40 of them. One of you should just volunteer to be a leader so that we don't waste time. So I've opened the breakout rooms.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
For those who have not joined, something is on your screen asking you to join a room. So kindly click so that you get to your room. For those who are still on this main room, we are getting into breakout rooms. There's a pop-up on your screen, so kindly join so that we continue the conversation in the breakout rooms. For those who have just joined, we have gone to breakout rooms. So I'm assigning you randomly. So something will pop up on your screen asking you to join a group. So kindly click and join. So in the breakout rooms, we are discussing about the impact of your father in your life. So there's already a team leader who is guiding the conversation. So see you on the other side. After 10 minutes, we will be back here. So something is on your screen asking you to join a group. So kindly do so. Those who are joining for the first time, we are in a brief or a small breakout room discussing something. You'll find a team leader there. So just join the conversation. In about 7 minutes, we will be back here.
I was in group 21, but it was silent. No, nothing's happening there. I had to come back here.
Oh, sorry. Now you can go and become the group leader.
Everybody's silent there.
Have you tried calling them?
I tried speaking, nobody's responding, so I don't know.
Okay, so that's
21
Miriam.
one. Yeah, group 21 is just silent.
Okay. Now it's hard to reassign you unless you log out, then you log in, then I assign you another group.
I log out?
Yes, then you log in immediately. Then I'll
Okay.
assign you another group.
Okay.
Okay. For those who have just joined, we are doing some discussion in the breakout rooms. So there's a pop-up on your screen asking you to join a group. So kindly just join. You'll find a team leader on the other side. So we are discussing about fatherhood impact. So please join a group. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I did click
Yes,
not
Daniel.
directing me to the group. I did click join a breakout room,
Yes.
but it's not posted me yet. Group.
Okay, let me see.
Thank you.
Somebody speaking? For those who have just joined, we are in a breakout room, a breakout session. Very soon we will be back here. So I'm just assigning each one of us randomly. So just join the conversation that is going on in the group about fatherhood. Then we'll be back in the main room. For those who have just joined, we are in a breakout room, a brief conversation, then we'll be back here.
You may
Hi, Moses. Okay, thank you. I can see they're closing in a few seconds. Thanks.
To find shelter before it gets dark.
Well, Timothy, we I know there are some people who have not finished, but at least some conversation was happening in most of the groups.
Eh,
So you can pick it up. And
yeah, I understand, because I think some of them are also joining the meeting as you're just taking them directly to the breakout rooms.
If the time was short.
Okay, 10 minutes was short. Wow, okay.
Oh, very short. We
in
had
fact,
just started.
we were there for about 15
You
minutes.
had it was an icebreaker. It was an icebreaker.
We were just about to form our WhatsApp group.
All right. Karibuni sana, everyone. Thank you so much for your time taken at the breakout rooms. Sorry for those who feel like you had a very short time, but we hope that you will continue engaging, because as we mentioned, it's a community. We'll be engaging as we continue. We hope that you have listened to one another, heard from people concerning the experiences as we took back memory lane to just understand the part of father figures in our lives, past, present, in terms of what we are going through. So let's get into back to the session. I will continue with the PowerPoint presentation. We'll have a moment just reviewing what you talked about at some juncture, so that we can be able to share more about that. So for those who are joining, my name is Timothy Matheka. Who have joined later on, my name is Timothy Matheka. I'm the facilitator for the session today. Our session is about the importance of a father or a father figure in the lives of our in line of moving from childhood to young adulthood. So Moses, I would like you to take you back to the slide which shares the explanation of the different Erik Erikson stages, so that I can share where we are going to be focusing on. I think it should be behind one more slide, if I'm not wrong, or ahead, in terms of the different stages. Yes, there. Thank you. So let me just start from here, in line of what we have just gone through, explaining what Erik Erikson, the stages, just how we've gone through. I want to unpack it more, to understand it more. So the 8 stages which are showing, or the 8 steps which were shown pictorially earlier on, we talked the first stage, which is the 0 to 1 year old, the psychosocial conflict, or the areas which are dealing with is trust versus mistrust. And the basic virtue here is hope. And they're infants, where infants learn to trust caregivers to meet their basic needs. In other words, at this stage of the development of a child, they are fully dependent, 100% dependent on the parents, because that's how they just trust the person who they have. Between the ages of 1 to 3 years, they're talking about the psychosocial conflict is between autonomy and shared doubt. The basic virtue is will, their will to do it. So toddlers develop a sense of personal control and independence. And this is where we talk about, for those who you remember, if you can go back memory lane, this is the point where you used to fight for everything, because you thought everything was yours. And you used to claim everything which passes through is yours. Those point of it. And then we have the 3 to 6 years. The psychosocial conflict is the initiative versus guilt. The basic virtue is purpose, where children here assert control through direct playing and social interactions. They're asserting their control. The 6 to 12 years old, this is where we talk about industry versus inferiority. The basic virtue here is competence, and children develop a sense of pride in accomplishments and abilities. In other words, this is the area which we're going to be looking at, where we are moving now from when we're talking about childhood to young adulthood. The area of focus which we'll be talking about today is the 12 to 18 years old, where the people who are getting to young adulthood, is the identity versus role confusion. The basic virtue is fidelity. Teens explore personal identity and sense of self. And then we have the next stage, which is the 18 to 40 years, talking about the intimacy versus isolation. This is the basic virtue is love. Young adults form intimate, loving relationships with others. This is the point of intimacy versus relations. And we go to the 40 to 65 years old, talk about generativity and stagnation. Their basic virtue is care. Adults here create or nurture things that will outlast them, contributing to society. So we're talking about the next stages of life, and this stage is where we are planning for retirement. At the famous saying where we usually say life starts at 40, and it comes to a place of looking at how do you need to nurture things, how do you need to do things for your next stage of life of time. And the last stage which he talks about is the 65 years and above, the older adult, which you're talking about ego integrity versus despair, where this the basic virtue here is wisdom. And most of you, when you're sharing your stories about your father, your great grandfather, or your grandfather, for those who are in this space, you talk about senior reflect on life and either feel a sense of fulfillment or regret. And this is where they speak into life, and this is the area. So these are the stages of Eric Erickson, and where the focus which I'll be talking on is for number 5, which is the identity versus role confusion in terms of us fathers and also father figures and how we need to have this transitional space as they're going through a psychosocial conflict of identity versus role confusion. So let's get into unpacking that. Let's continue going to unpacking that. So the next slide talks, you just quick, I think you'll just jump 2 more slides to get into the space of yes, thank you. So identity versus role confusion, identity versus role confusion. So the pictorial there is very clear. Identity from the first area, you just see the point of affirmation yourself, getting to understand yourself. Role confusion, at the depiction there, you can need to understand they don't understand what their role is. And you can see that is what we're dealing with. This is the stage which we'll be talking about how us as fathers and also as father figures, how we need to have them in this stage of life and what is the importance as we look at it. So the next slide. So let's dive into it. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll talk about it from a point of the 5 thematic areas of the whole person. That is the physical, social, emotional, mental, spiritual. So the first part is physical. So this is where we talk about the areas of the biological, the creation, how they are created in terms of the blessings that you've been given. God created them. In other words, we're talking about the point of the child when they're given unto you, when they came into this world and as a father. So what are the things that we need to look at as the importance, especially as we just quickly look at this stage of identity versus role confusion. So the first thing is on the area of physical is acceptance and affirmation. The next slide, affirmation or acceptance, acceptance and affirmation. So while we talk about acceptance and affirmation, the 3 areas or maybe areas which we'll be looking at as fathers and father figures that we need to do for both sexes. And we look at it for both from the girls, and the young boys, and the young, let me call them the young men and the young ladies. So the first thing in the affirmation area is to align. Why I'm saying this, we're in a space as to bring it into context. We're in a place where things are happening in terms of identity, in terms of, and this is where the part of physical is, how are we further stepping into the gap to align them to what is right, to speak into their life, to align them to what is right. And I think when people are sharing in terms of explaining their fathers in one word, there are key things which came into place in the point of about their presence, the activities that they did in terms of what they used to do and how you used to perceive or understand them, but also other things were being expressed physically, which we saw with them, and those are the key things. So one is aligning. Second, to the next point, we talk about the areas of encouragement and inspiration. So inspiration means what? They're going through changes in their lives in this stage, and they're trying to understand what is next, what do I need to do, and they need to be inspired well to then this stage of transition when they're moving from childhood to young adulthood. Inspiration is key. Inspiration is key. As in the Bible says, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. So how do you inspire them? We're in a context, even as we look at it now, we're in a context where if I was to use the analogy of computer science, or it says, we used to say this when you're being taught about the packages of Windows, is what you see is what you get. And most of the opportunities that we are in the stage where children now are very cognizant about their image. And you'll see even these young children compared to the different generational gaps we were dealing with, there are certain structures which are clear. If you're talking about the baby boomers and the builders. The structures were clear. They knew how you need to dress, but now we are going to a space where now it's more relative according to how somebody feels, how much somebody is influenced. And those are the things that you need to inspire them to the right thing. And the other part is encouragement. Encouragement, because we are dealing with so many things about the physicalness of a person, is the image aspect, the how you're seen. And this is very important even for us fathers as we speak. We speak to the point of affirming them in who they are and who God has blessed them with, who they are and how their composition. The one thing which we usually like to tell even fathers and father figures during this stage of young adulthood is that there's one place which you cannot change, is the physical development or the changes which happen physically, which are more genetical and their certifical aspect of their body changes which are happening. But the key thing is that how do you get into that space to affirm them and to encourage them that even as they're going through this stage, it is a stage that they need to be aware of. So it is important to know that these areas of affirmation and acceptance are key during this point. Why do I say acceptance? Is that acceptance means that they need to feel affirmed, especially for us fathers, that we need to accept them to how they are. In other words, the body formation. Because there are moments where if you speak something, and this is something which I can tell you from a point as a father and also a father figure, is that when you say something, they're it's taken very highly. If I was to give a personal experience, my own daughter, whenever I tell her something about how maybe her face looks or how her finger looks, should be very, very sensitive compared to the moments where I'll be quick to just keep quiet. And this means that I need to be encouraging more so that they can see it. Even for my son, the same thing. When I say something, how do I create it? And those are the things about acceptance so that they can feel that my dad accepts me, my father accepts me. So the more than just being able, and this is areas of physical. So these three areas becomes a point of cognizance, especially when they're moving from this stage, because when the children, they see you as the epitome of let me say the stardom in their lives. That is how they see you. But they're moving to a stage where influences are coming in and they need this in their lives. How are you affirming them? How are you accepting them? And that becomes but acceptance has to be aligned to something. And this is the key thing which I'm talking about, that we need to align them to what God is calling unto them, what God wants to see them. As scripturally we're talking about, our bodies are created for his glory. We are built, God created us for his own glory. And we need to be able to express it. We'll be living sacrifices. That means we need to espouse what God is calling out in our lives. So even if they're going through areas of their physicalness, we need to be able to align them to that, to point them to God, that they need to represent that in their lives. The second stage, or the area of physical, just quickly, I will go to the next slide, is talking about the social, that is the relational or relationships that we're talking about in terms of the social aspect as they're going in this stage of young adulthood, as they're getting from children to young adulthood. The picture there depicts a lot, and I picked it intentionally, is that socialness has gone to a space of purely screens or digital areas. And that's how they see, that's the currency of the socialness. We know this as parents who are here. We know it as the stage which we are in dealing with the children at this stage. Screens have been there, even for us who are dealing with toddlers or preschoolers, if I was to say that, is that we are using even screens to use them in the part of the socialness. And some of you are here, maybe in terms of my age or the group or the age which I'm in, you'll notice that, and this is just on a light note, you'll notice that your children start speaking according to the cartoons that they see, the cocomelons, all these things. You'll notice that's how they speak, the tone of voice and all that. So the social aspect of their lives depicts from what they're seeing from the screen. But being fathers or father figures in their lives means a lot. So the next slide, what does that mean for us? We need to do. We need to be available. Availability is very important. We need to create the spaces intentionally and environments to be able to be available so that we can influence them for the right areas. So we need to be available. So fathers, we need to be available. I've seen from the feedback which we received about unavailable or fathers who are present in the body but away in their mind. In other words, the other aspects. Physically, they are present, but they're not present emotionally, socially, mentally, or spiritually in the lives of things. So we need to be able to create these spaces as fathers, as father figures in the lives of these young children who are transitioning. Both boys and girls, we need to create those spaces. The other thing is love. Love, love. We need to be able to love diligently without fail, that we can express love in our children. And this is something which I can challenge us, even for us parents. That's why I took you through the breakout rooms. You're understanding, we're going through a memory lane to understand how our fathers were, how we are as fathers. But the key thing is that I want to challenge us, even as we get out of beyond this room. I want us to go and to get to understand what our love language is. Just a simple overview, what our love language is. I know some of you, depending on the generation where you are, some of you will be asking, you are wondering, what is this guy saying about love languages? For us, we love, and that is what I want to challenge us. Let's get to a point of introspection and understand what is love. What is love? What are the love languages? And especially, what are the love languages of our children? Because at this stage where they're getting into young adulthood, they're shaping themselves. They're getting to understand why we talked about identity versus role confusion. Their identity is becoming more clearer. They're trying to understand it and they need to be shaped. So we need to be able to understand some things. Their love languages, which is a very important, which are very important. So we need to understand what our love languages and what are our love languages of our children, especially at this stage, so that you can help them to shape them what is a creative. So the area of socialness means we need to be available fathers or father figures. We need to be available. If we want to speak in the lives of our children, we need to be available. And I'm looking for a scripture very quickly in terms of the scripture. Yes, it's in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 1 to 9. And if you allow me, just let me read it quickly. I'm reading from the ESV translation. It says this: Hear, O sons, a father's instructions, and be attentive, that you may gain insight, for I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said to me, Let your heart hold fast my words, keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. That those verses come a place of reference to say that if you need to teach them these precepts, these areas of listening, the instructions, one thing as fathers and father figures, we need to be available. This social aspect of their lives, we need to be available. We cannot be second people on this area. We need to be the first point of reference. We need the first people. And this is very important as they're transitioning to this space, that they need to feel it. They need to see it. They need to experience it. And that's why love and the spaces and environments becomes a place of how we can do that. We need to love diligently. And I want to take you back to scripture. We'll talk about what is love. Love is patient. Love is kind. All these things are important during this process. But as parents, as I know, some moments where you're saying love is patient, and you're wondering, oh, okay, love is how is patient? And maybe it's a question that, but we need to be available, fathers. We need to be available. And the consequences which come with it if we're not available. And we'll be expounding it more as we talk about the next steps. The next stage is the issue of the mental, the issue of the mental, the issue of the mental. So mental talks about the thinking, the critical thinking, how are they engaging, what are those things which are they engaging into their minds. So one of the things we get into here is that as fathers, what we need to do, the next stage is the area of authority, the area of authority, the area of authority. We're in a space, especially for these young people, we need to be able to be a sign of authority in their lives in terms of how they're thinking. We need to help them. One area is aligning, that we need to align them to what is true, what is right, what is true, and what is right. Because we know very well this is good. The other thing is discipline. Discipline is important. In this area of mental thinking, what they perceive, what they process, and how they think comes to a point of action. And that action has to be maintained. And how do you do these actions? Key thing is disciplining comes first place. There's a question which was read about how do you discipline, especially for young children. And disciplining has certain precepts about it. The Bible says, do not spare the rod, spoil the child. And they talk about this part aspect. But in the area of mental aspect, in terms of how they're thinking, we need to align them well. And alignment means aligning them to what is right and what is true. And disciplining means you need to discipline them in all the things that they're thinking about. What are things you need to discipline, meaning bring them to a place of being able to cut out what is wrong in their lives. The next stage is we're talking about emotional, which is feelings. So this area we talk about and fathers, which is important, is asking and listening. How are we asking and how are we listening? And I think most of you have been accused of this, and we have been accused of the generation which we're dealing with, which is the Gen Alpha, as we're talking about now. And even we're going through, as you see, for the Gen Zs, we are talking about, we are not listening. We are not listening to them. And they're acting out in terms of the listening. But how do we need to get into that space as fathers? We need to ask more and listen more. The book of James says, slow to speak, quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Because the anger is not, in other words, I'm paraphrasing, anger is not will not lead to the righteousness of God. It's being able to be slow to act, but quick to listen. Slow to act, but quick to listen. For us who were raised by baby boomers, it used to be the opposite. Action happened, and then now you are taught what is wrong. You know those moments where your parents discipline you first, and then now you talk. Now we're in a stage where the child, if you do that, they're quick to either put a wall and put you away. But the important thing is that we are be able to now, actually that verse becomes real. No, it's in terms of the context of the verse talks about as fellowship as believers, but also it's important for us to realize that also for us as parents, we need to be quick to listen. And these are the consequences which you're facing. As fathers, we need to be able to listen more. And I know somebody had mentioned. The other thing is seeking understanding is very important at this stage. Seeking understanding, to understand them. Stephen Covey's the 7 highly effective people, it says, seek first to understand so that you can be understood. We're in a stage now, you need to seek first to understand them so that when you're taking them through that, they can understand you too. So we need to be able to seek understanding as fathers. We're in a place where we are looked at. And let me tell you, fathers and father figures in the lives of these young people who are transitioning this space, this is a very big thing for you to be able to sit down and listen, to be able to quick to listen first. Through that listening, you're able to understand. And that understanding helps you to be able to bring the lessons out from a point of being understood, to have them, to guide them in terms of their lives and where you want them to be or where to go. Because this age is very critical, because as I said, it's young adulthood, so they're forming themselves to adulthood. We reach a place where if we lose them, if you're not understanding them so that you can speak in their lives, they will take it out from any other place to be able to do what they see out there. So fathers, create time, just ask more, listen more, ask more and listen more. The next stage is the last stage, which is now, I think it's spiritual. Spiritual, that is belief and faith. Belief and faith. So what is it being called as fathers and father figures? One, a part of the area we need to be able to model. We need to be able to model. In the space of spirituality, we need to be able to model. As the Bible says, either you're taking water, drinking wine, or vice versa. If I was to use that, if I was just to give an example, we need to model. Spirituality has to be modeled. Belief and faith has to be modeled. If we cannot do this, we cannot expect our children to have that foundation to be able to do it. And it's important to be able to model what is right spiritually in the lives of the children. In terms of prayer, in terms of leading them in the place of faith, depending if you're a Christian, we need to be able to model that. The other thing is training. Another, we need to train them. We need to train them. The Bible says, and this is a verse which will be coming next slide, Proverbs 22, verse 6, is that we need to train up a child in the way that they should go. And when he is old, he will not depart from it. So we need to train up the children in the way that he should go. Even when he is old, he shall not depart from it. So fathers and father figures, this is a very quick overview, just stating that these 5 areas are key for us to be able to feed into them. Because if we don't feed into them in the part of physical, which is affirmation and acceptance, if we don't feed into them the point of social aspect where we are available, if we don't feed into them the area of mental where we're giving them authority in terms of the things that they're going through, the learning and all that, the critical thinking space which they're going through in this stage of transition, if the areas of spirituality where we're not modeling or we're not training them, we will lose them. And this is the space we have been given as fathers and father figures. It's very important. Even scripturally, we'll notice that these examples which are shared scripturally are always referencing us to the pride of a father of a good son, the pride of a father in terms of goodness, of their righteous walk. All these are depicted scripturally. So, fathers, we need to be able to come back into this space and to understand that we cannot lose sight of those 5 areas of whole person circle of the child as they're transitioning into this space. And it's very important. Even beyond even that stage is to also to remind us, even for the parents who have older kids who are moving from beyond the children to young adulthood to also adulthood, is that these 5 areas are key for you to be continually doing them. Because I had even during our breakout room, somebody sharing even this, as old as his father is in 83, there are things which he sees that he really up to date rubs into him that he does it even for his own children at the moment. So that becomes the point of why the Bible says, even when you are old, you will not depart from it. So let's get into the next stage of the next steps. So what are we talking about? And maybe let me just quickly. The first area is introspection. As fathers who are here, father figures, we need to understand that we need to understand ourselves first if we are going to be helpful in the stage of this transition. We need to understand. So there's an introspection part. And where I'm taking review is that both direct and indirect. When you are at the breakout rooms, when you're sharing the story of your father, some of you were seeing even why you do what you do now. I'm sure some of the things, some of you even reflecting now, you'll notice that the things which you're doing were exactly what some of them were. Either what you saw your father do, good or bad, which are actually you're doing them now. But it's important to do that introspection, to understanding yourself, so that it can help you to review yourself from a point of being vulnerable as a father, so that you can see what are the areas that can change in line of you're raising a child. Contexts are different. You can find the way you were raised is different in terms of how you're raising your child now as a father and a father figure. So introspection is very important. Understanding self is very, very important. That is key. Reviewing both directly and indirectly. Directly means yourself. Indirectly is getting the point of feedback as fathers. And this is where it gets to the next step of the next step is community. Community. And it's important that we need to plug in into a community, fathers. We need to be able to come with, in the book of Proverbs, if I'm not wrong, talks about that people we lose people because of maybe I'm paraphrasing, they lose people are lost because of lack of counsel. And fathers, it's important to know that you cannot be able to do this alone. You need a community. Even as we look at our fathers who were there before us, they had community of other men who they used to work with and they used to share. And this is something which I remember evidently even for my own, if I was to give a real life story. I met a father who used to hang out with my father and used to tell me, Tim, I'm very proud that you're doing this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thing. Your father shares this a lot about you. And I noticed there's a community around my dad, which sometimes he goes and shares about what are things are going through, and it comes a point of it. Even for us who are father figures, that is the single parents, you need to get a community. For those who feel like their parents, either you're different sexes, whether you're a single father with a girl or a single mother with a son, is to be affirmed that you need that community, which can really help you. It is being able to have a community. So this is a step which you need. If you're not in a community, get a good community where you can be able to be helped, to get counsel. You cannot do it alone. That is where the community comes into place. And I like to say this, that even in scripture you say, do not forsake the fellowship of believers. So parenting also is key. It's key to help us to that. Number 3 is action. We need to be able to act on areas which we need to change. That it's not only for procrastination or areas of theory, but we need to be able to act. Our children as fathers, most of us have talked about how our fathers are hardworking. They saw that. They were able to come out and do things. And this action, I'm talking about the area of action in the soft areas, which we need to come out and stand in the gap, which we're losing up. We need to act. We need to stand in the gap. Maybe we have reached a point where we're giving up, but we need to be able to stand up in the gap and act. Action means practical things. The other thing is support. Support. Why do I want to say support differently compared to communities? That each one of us has different, let me say, backgrounds, areas, or what you're going through. and you need support one area or another. And it's important that we need as fathers to know that even if I was to talk to about the fathers who are the male, the fathers now, the men who are here, is that sometimes we are quick to stand as an island as we're doing fatherhood, and we want to do it by ourselves, but we need to be reminded that we need support. And that support can come through either plugging yourself in that community which is talking out online, but being able to look at that from a point of get out from that zone and start to work towards it. That you need support, get us support. And there are moments which are very important to that. So those four becomes the next steps. If any parents who are here who are going through a place of understanding, how do I move to those 5 areas? How do I become more available? How can I affirm more? How can I do acceptance more? Better, sorry. How can I be able to model the spiritually aspect modeling and also guiding and also modeling and also training are key things. These are the some of the base, if I was to say the base aspects of where we can start from, is that introspection is very important, that you need to start to ask yourself the why questions. Why do I do what I do? And get to understand. And this comes to the point of why we took the memory lane, getting to understand where we're coming from in terms of context, influences, which has been there in your growing up to where you are as a parent now. Getting to understand yourself, both directly and indirectly, which you can get the 360 feedback. But also the community is important. We need to be in a community. It's very key to have a community around you to be able to do this. Even for parents, it's always important, both the fathers or generally even other parents, whether mother, father, it's important to have a community. 3 is to act. Action is key. We cannot, where we are dealing with fathers, we need to stand in the gap and act. I think what has been depicted for us, we're being told we're losing the fight because the fathers are no longer there, because we are taking a backseat. But we need to come out and act and be able to do action. But also the point thing, we cannot operate like an island. We need support. And that support is important to become better fathers. I want to close that we have a book which we take through people during this stage, which is a parent's manual, that we take them through 5 A's and 5 C's of teen parenting principles, which are the 5 A's and the 5 C's, which are the positive youth development theorem. And this book helps you as a parent to understand this stage and look at it and go through. It's a workbook that you get to understand more about yourself first, also understanding your child as you have them during this transitional space of moving from childhood to young adulthood. And the last slide just talking about contacts, and these are our contacts in case you want to get more details about us, our website, our cell phone numbers, our emails, which you can get, and also our IG handles, both IGX and Facebook handles, which you can get into space. And the last slide, we'll just get into a space of maybe now opening it up through Moses will guide me in terms of a time of Q&A, maybe for questions in line of what I've taken you through. I've just been able to summarize it the best I can to be able to just speak out what are the things that we need to look at or things to do as fathers, our father figures in the lives of our children who are transitioning from childhood to young adulthood, to help them to become the part of Proverbs 2 verse 6, to help them to look at it from the point of the next stage of life, that when they grow old, they shall not depart on the values which you impart to them. Thank you so much. Maybe I will take this moment to point of Q&A. Any questions or comments in line of what I've shared? And I think there are questions which are coming through, even when we started the session. I think Moses will help me and guide me in terms of how we are going to be able to answer those questions.
First and foremost, thank you so much, Timothy. If you're able to just wave, if you're able to send confettis to him, we will. That would be really appreciated. Bwana Timothy, we are really grateful for creating time.
What's up?
Thank you, Anthony. The confettis, I could see them. The first thing that I'm saying is, how can they get the presentation? Frida, you are. Oh, thank you. I didn't want to miss what you were asking if it was a question. So, the first thing is, and Steve, you could help with that. How can they get this presentation?
Thank you.
Maybe.
Now, we will share the presentation with everyone who registered. If you did not register, then please leave your contact, especially a WhatsApp number on the chat box, so that we'll be able to share the presentation with you and also let you know what's coming up. Like next week, we have a webinar on parenting again, especially effective discipline for children. It's coming up next week, so you don't want to miss that. And then again, if you want to join our WhatsApp group, there it is. I've shared the link there. You'll be able to trace it. Moses, you can proceed.
Thank you. I am trying to trace back to the first question that was asked by Cherry. What happens to children raised by single moms, boys especially? I probably should read like 3 questions and then you're able to answer them just because of time. And I would kindly ask, I know we are always very keen on time, that we had communicated 9 p.m. I suspect we might overshoot it a little bit. Kindly bear with us. So question number 1 is, what happens to children raised by single moms, boys especially? And then the other was, or maybe you can go to that as I go to the most recent questions.
Yeah, I believe Sherry was the first person who. So in terms of what happens, and I think the question is, I'll look at it from a two-pronged approach. I think the question is how to handle the point of the negative aspect and the positive. So as a single parent who's a mother to a young man, I think the first thing is the point of one, as I mentioned earlier about the next steps, is that you need to be able to get a community of how the young man can be influenced and how to raise, how to can be helped. This can be, and let me be precise, is that the person who you want them to be raised has to be, if I was to use the word of job application, they have to be sieved. In other words, they have to be criteria so that you can be able to have somebody who can speak into their lives in the positive way in their lives. So it's important that you get to that space where it is. Now, there are key things which they are going through this stage of life that you need to be able to have that father figure, if I was to say it, as a parent, as a mother, you're a father figure, yes, but also getting a same-sex person who can be also a father figure who can walk along with you to be able to help you in this transition of life. And it's important that key thing to be able to look at how to. Now, the point of how they're raised, I know this is something which has been there a lot in terms of most of the blame, if I was to take it from the negative point, is that mothers who have boys, they raise soft boys, the boys that don't have this and all that. But being able to manage that, and I think that is the key thing, being able to manage that is to get that community. How do you get that community? What is the support structure that you have to be able to raise the young man? And that is how you can be able to deal with any negative things which in your space as a mother and also as a father figure, because you're standing in that gap, to be able to look at from the point of somebody else can able to impact them from a point of as a man, so that they can be raised well in the area of the transition, which is key for them during this stage of childhood into young adulthood. So that's how I can answer you. I hope I'm able to help you to share on that, to share some light on that. So those are some of the solutions which can be there to manage that aspect. Some moments is that maybe you can go further and tell me you don't have that community, you don't have that support. How does that look like? And this thing is that we should be able, and this is something which I always encourage us to look at spaces where you can see, and that's where you have, and that's where community is very important. Even in your own family, who are the father people or people who are male role models that you can use to help you in this age of life, especially as they're going through this transitional space, so that they can understand themselves. So that is very, very key in terms of that question. So that in terms of how do you handle that, in terms of as a mother who has a son, you're trying to raise them in this stage of transition.
Thank you. The next line of questions is about
Moses,
discipline.
just before you go to the next line, I've just
Yes.
been reminded by the team here that we will continue with this conversation in the next few weeks. So
Okay.
those who have several questions that may not be handled here, we are going to have a
Yes.
series again on the very topic, but handling different things and responding to many of these questions. But you can proceed now.
Thank you. So how much time can we stretch ourselves by, Steve?
If we can close by 9:10, the better.
Excellent.
And we ask the parents to bear with us.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is on discipline, and I'm combining a few others. How do you draw the line between discipline and punishment? And another question about discipline is, please expound, what does spare the rod really mean? Spare the rod and spoil the child, what does it really mean? And I think I'll also combine it with another question about discipline, that does naughty corner really qualify as discipline?
Right. I will try to combine those questions to answer them as one. One thing is that the point of the difference between discipline and punishment. Discipline brings out value or lesson to be able to change their behavior or ways. Punishment is to put them in a space where there is no change but pain. And that is, if us look at it from a parenting perspective, is that when you're doing punishment, you're just putting pain into them. They're not learning or moving or getting the value or learning or change is happening. Disciplining means you're looking at it from a point of change is happening. So there's a process. Punishment, and I can say this, punishment is always a quick, immediate, it's something which happens at now. It's a present nature of doing it. Like you're punishing the child, you're assuming that it will change them and they'll take it as that because it's an action oriented. Discipline looks at it from a discipleship based and goes through a process all through. And that is how I can define the differentiator between discipline and punishment. In the other two questions which you raised is a point of, is naughty corner something which can be defined as discipline, is also is how are you doing the naughty corner. The naughty corner is there's a consequence to it, and somebody can look at, if I don't do this, I go to the naughty corner. And those are models. I think those are models of disciplines which you're using. But the key thing is that is how are you feeding into it? Is it that every time you throw them there and there's no processing of the issue, which can be there, but also going to the point of the sparing the rod, spoiling the child, looks at it from that perspective. Sparing the rod means what are you doing not for them to be doing what is wrong? What does that mean? What are the consequences? What are the things that we're doing in line of that? And those are the things which are there. I know sparing the rod has always been looked at literally about the cane, which is how it is looked at. But how are we looking at it from the whole holistic aspect? Because if I'm going to discipline the child to understand it from a point of emotional, mental, and social aspect, they need to look at it from the point. I cannot beat out the friend out of my child, but it's how to help them to see what is wrong. And that is very clear to understand. So that is how I can say the differentiator, and also to answer the two questions about the sparing the rod and the naughty corner is how are we processing the discipline? Because discipline is a process-based. If I was to use the word discipleship-based model. And that's where it's coming from, discipleship, discipline. So it's supposed to be a process-based model of how to deal with it. Not more punishment means bringing out something very big or very harsh so that you can bring a lesson. But how are you processing it? Because if you leave it at that, that's purely punishment. Because if you beat, those moments where, and I know some of you have children who are in the stage of toddlers or preteens, or who are here in the area of the identity versus the preteens, you'll notice whenever you discipline, they are more inclined to understand or to seek to understand you more. But when it comes to punishment, it's a question of rebelliousness. They're trying to push back because they feel like what you did was wrong compared to the lessons which they want to learn or what you're disciplining them on. So that's how I can answer the question. I hope I've been able to address the questions.
Thank you. The next round of questions is about absentee fathers or toxic fathers. And I can frame it this way. One says that sadly, few men are willing to raise other men's sons. So at some point, we just need to tell women how to raise manly sons. I guess it's a question of how do single mothers, if I would reframe that, be able to raise sons or find a community, as someone else asked, to raise the sons in that environment. And two, in a case where there's a very toxic father, and if I quote a few of those qualifications that, he's so toxic that he doesn't listen to them, doesn't say thank you, sorry, or please shouts when he's angry. What would you advise the mother in that situation? So absentee fathers, how do you advise the mothers who are raising sons in that environment, or toxic ones? Yeah.
First and foremost, I want to appreciate the mothers who are in this space. I think I know it's a hard space to be in, being that you already understand the other party in terms of let me say, the social or psychological behaviors that they have in the area of parenting, and especially to you as a parent. Just to appreciate you in terms of that. But also, what I can say, but what I want to say in that area is that being that is clear, is that one thing, and I know this is a hard process to be in, is that there are two areas which I mentioned earlier: support and the community. And I want to look at it this way, and this is something which is important. I need to break it down that also affects the child. And I understand from a young man's perspective, if the father is toxic, means the behaviors or what they see in terms of how they relate with you as the father, and also how they relate to the child, it will affect the child and how they'll see it and how they'll take it as growing up as an example or a way of how to express themselves. So there are key areas there to look at. One is support. How do that support look like? Number one, as mothers, it's important to be able to engage, to get to learn more about young men, and getting to feed yourself into that space of knowledge or spaces that you're able to understand young men's areas of development and how do you need to be able to address them. So one area is that you may be able to create spaces where you can dive into and get to learn. I think learning is key. Learning is key. This space, if you're in that space, learning is key. Number two is also to be aware that even you need to take care of yourself also, because I am sure it will affect you as a person in the whole person aspect. This will also affect how you're able to raise the young man in your life. So you need that community where you can be able to be, let me call it, refreshed or re-energized, to be able to act in this space, where means a lot needs to be able to look at in terms of, that's where the community comes in. So it's important that is key, that is there. But that is more of the part of how to handle the raising the child as a person who's already aware that this is a toxic father. But also the toxicity has to be looked at from the point of also how do we create environments for that is now an extra mile. And know it's hard, that they can be able to be aware that they need help, they need to be assisted, they need to know that they need to go places. And that's why now, where I was talking about action, is that we need to be able to create spaces for these men to come in and to be assisted if they need to be referred to places. Sometimes you can share with them a men's conference or a men's place of help or men's areas of, and this helps them to process which is the first part of which I talk about introspection, so that they can understand themselves, so that they can work in themselves. So these are some of the areas which I can say about the issue of being aware about having a toxic father in the life of a son or a daughter, even a young daughter, because it's both sexes, whether it's a man, a young boy, or a young girl. The fact is, if there is a toxic father, it affects them physically, emotionally, especially emotionally, socially, mentally. And that is very, very important to note about it. And those are simple ways of how you can begin as baby steps, if I was to say, to be able to deal with that. Back to you, Moses.
Good people, there are so many other very important questions that are being fielded, but because of time, allow me to hand it back to Aomo. But I've taken note, people are asking what social welfare or children department can we confront for negligent fathers? Is it a must for a child to know who the biological father is? There's so many good questions that I think the team is able to take note of, and hopefully we'll be able to begin with that. And thank you so much, Timothy, for being able to answer those, and in a most gracious manner as you have. Steve, as I hand over to you, there are questions of, what about mothers? You have talked about sons today. What about mothers? What about forums for single mothers? Are there programs like that? I think as I hand over to you, you probably would